Jesus, what is this? 78, I want to say. Since you guys had a good response to me offering guests, I figured I'll get you someone who has never been on here before. I've been kind of going through them because there are certain people I like. They keep on coming back. Well, this gentleman is completely new, sort of. A lot of you who are in the precision shooting community will know who he is. His face is not exactly hidden. This is Craig Arnzen from Area 419. And the reason I wanted to have Craig here, I keep on getting requests to talk about scope mounts. And I've been going through a significant number of scope mounts. I have the whole table with different designs that I like or don't like. And the ones that I like the most lately, at least for precision applications, are the scope mounts, single piece scope mounts from Area 419. I have a couple of them. I'm sure Craig has a bunch of props. I have a couple here. One that is here. One is standalone and one with the scope in it. The scope is the Delta Javelin 4.5 to 30 by 56. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll let Craig talk about the company and the rest of their products. I don't know a whole lot about their other products. We've talked a little bit about muzzle devices, started looking into it. And it turns out that they do a lot that I was completely unaware of. And everything that I've looked at and looked into a little bit more carefully that they do is clever. It looks to be done well, which is honestly, it piqued my interest a little bit. And I figured we should bring Craig on and talk about the products that I don't know about. So the scope mounts I can talk to. I'm sure he'll add something, but there is a lot more to it, and a guest would have been a good idea. All right, I see people are beginning to add in. A couple of people are commenting. I assume you can hear me well. No audio issues, not like that. Yes, no, maybe. I'm going to go ahead and assume that you guys can hear me well since nobody's complaining. Mr. Northman is here. Excellent. So this is going live to Rumble, my locals webpage, YouTube, Facebook, and X. If you're sending a message on Facebook or X, I will not see it. Okay, Mr. Honorable Mention says you guys can hear me. Excellent. Messages, chat box from Rumble, locals, and YouTube should be coming through here, so we should be okay. All right, I'm gonna add Craig to the stream. I forcibly muted him. I'm gonna unmute him. Never mind, I can't unmute you. You have to unmute yourself. Perfect. Now you can hear him.
Perfect.
And now you can see him. So, right, Craig, this is your time. Introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on, Ilya. You talked a little bit about Area 419, and we're going to talk about scope mounts and all of those things, obviously. But the origins of Area 419, and by the way, chat, I'm in the shop tonight. It's 9 o'clock, a little bit after here, so we're doing some late night. It's just me, and this is Homer, and over there is Marge, a couple robots in the shop with me, but that's really it. Let me know about the sound in case it's too loud here. I can move somewhere else in the building. But Area 419 is a precision rifle parts and accessories as well as reloading tools company. We're based in Northwest Ohio. And everything really started in, we'll call it the early 20-teens. John Addis, who started the company, owns the company, was a college student going through a mechanical engineering program, but got into custom rifles. As we all know, custom rifles are very expensive. So instead of
very addictive.
Oh yeah, especially if you're a college kid, But at that point, John's working at a Gander Mountain, RIP Gander Mountain, and they had decided to get rid of their gunsmithing program in their stores. So they had an inexpensive lathe and inexpensive kind of drill mill type, manual mill. And he picked them up from Gander Mountain for effectively nothing, and taught himself to spin barrels. So from 2008, 9, 10 of John kind of screwing around with that lathe to 2016, it was basically a custom rifle shop. 2016, John decides that he wants to get into making parts. He starts making some loading blocks. He comes up with the idea of the Hellfire.
So I see Craig is...
Okay. So we get up to the Hellfire. He comes up with this novel idea
Guys,
of how
when I see Craig freezing occasionally, is it on my side only, or do you also see him freezing occasionally? Okay, now you're not. You froze a couple of times. I'm trying to figure out if it's on my end or if everybody else sees you as occasionally freezing. Guys, we need some feedback here. Internet is betraying us.
Yeah, and it could totally be me. I'm out in the middle of the shop floor on Wi-Fi, so if it is me, I can go somewhere else. But
well, let's keep going and see, guys. If we see us freezing, please tell us. All right.
So we get into John gets into making parts in 2016. I get a hold of him. I'm some guy on the internet halfway across the country that's trying to buy parts from him, and his website's busted. I connect with him, build a website. He keeps designing parts. Justin Watson, who's our VP of operations and an unbelievable human being and excellent at what he does, he gets in the shop and takes John and I, who tend to be somewhat flighty, chasing shining objects people, and he makes the trains run on time. And we've got now roughly 30 people in the. Okay, we're good on speed. We got roughly 30 people in here now. We've got, I think, 18 CNC machines. We ship all over the world every day. We've got a couple hundred global dealers, and yeah, I mean it's gone crazy. You know, and what started with effectively a Hellfire, and I don't think I have one here. A simple loading block has turned into something that is fairly comprehensive. You know, if you're buying a precision rifle and kitting it out, we like to think we have most of what you need as far as the metal parts go. And if you are building a reloading room, we have a series of premium reloading tools and products that we think are without peer in the market. And we proudly make it all right here in Northwest Ohio out of American raw material. And we work locally and ship globally, and we're really proud of it.
So area 419, that's just the phone area code where you are?
Yeah, area 419. So if you call into the shop, the first three numbers you're punching in are 419. Unless it's me, my phone number is still Missouri, but
okay.
For the shop for locally here, it's the area code.
So I didn't know that, right? And I'm thinking, like, what the hell is 419? And remember, I work within the kind of a military DoD world for the most part.
Sure.
And the most common question I get is usually about Area 51, because I've been to Area 51. Apparently, I'm supposed to know. It's just an Air Force base.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, 419. I don't know what military base that is, right? Then it dawned on me that's just the area code for the phone.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. All right. So thank you for that introduction. And let's see. So as I mentioned earlier, of all of the things that Area 419 or 419, how do you usually say it?
We say 419. I don't care either way. As long as somebody's talking about the brand, we consider it a good thing.
Okay, I'll go with 419, right? So the only thing I know of 419 is the scope mounts. As I said, I have a couple of them. I used them in a precision class. I've done quite a lot of shooting with it. I've hiked around hills with it on a rifle that had too much scope to be a hunting rifle, but I've done that, and they've held up impressively well. And one of the things, before we go into the specifics, I want to mention, reiterate in general about general principles, what makes a scope mount good and what doesn't. In principle, right, it should be simple. You pop a scope in it, attach it to the rifle, and it should all work. And here's the catch. Most mounts, even not very good ones, work most of the time. So when we talk about scope mounts, we're really trying to find something that will minimize the possibility of an outlier, right? Tolerance stack up something. And then, and that's probably my pet peeve, and I don't know if Craig has heard this one yet. I'm about to start whining and complaining about the industry. My pet peeve is that I see a ton of stuff that's beautifully designed, and it's just not engineered well. The fuckers can't, pardon my French, drives me nuts. Can't engineer anything for the life of me. I see things where the cross sections are clearly wrong, or lots of weird shit. And so here's I was trying to figure out what are the general guidelines, what makes a mount well engineered. It doesn't necessarily have to look good, although I like the way you guys styled your mounts. But from an engineering standpoint, what do I want, right? So first thing, I want a Stanag clamp, right?
Yep.
Something that has 3 datum surfaces.
3 points on the rail grabber. Picatinny from a female standpoint is
Picatinny makes no sense. You cannot build anything with 4 datum surfaces, right? You have to be just a bad engineer. So I want 3 datum surfaces. I want them set up so that when you clamp the mount on a rail, what holds it on the rail in the right place is the geometry of it, not the friction. This is a very, very important point that gets missed. And let me grab the mount. I'm going to explain what I mean, right? So on the rail grabber mount, I don't know if you guys can see it, there is a flat over here, and there is the bottom angled sections on the clamp. Ultimately, it's not even a bad idea to put a little bit of grease on them so that they can slide. Friction on a mount like this is not supposed to be holding things in place. There's a recoil key that references to the rail, and that is what holds it in place. Okay. On the scope rings, not rocket science. They have to be perfectly round, and these are as perfect as I've ever seen. The scope and the ring halves have to be so stiff that you go from completely loose to perfectly tightened in a very small amount, maybe a half a turn, quarter a turn rotation of the screw. Not rocket science, right? Should be simple. Well, I don't know how many different designs I've looked at this stage. I don't know if it's in 3 digits, but it might be. And most of them fail on at least one of these basic principles, right? Then there is the secondary stuff. For example, somebody asked me earlier today on the hide about this mount versus the gray ops mount. I've never used the gray ops mount. I don't have any personal insight. But one thing I look at, if you look at the clamp, see the 2 clamps are completely disconnected from each other. When you see one long clamp, one single piece clamp, that means as you tighten them, there's crosstalk between the 4 screws or 5 screws or whatever number you have. Does it mean it's necessarily going to fail you? No. Does it mean there's a high chance of a screw up? Yeah. I've seen more than one mount where people complain that the scope is drifting and they just didn't torque the single long clamp bar correctly. And what it does, even on a rimfire, the mount will start drifting sideways a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. You'll think it's a scope, you'll send the scope, and that's just you not knowing how to use a torque wrench, basically. Okay, rant off. Now you've heard my rant. So I went on a holy grail search and I started looking at mounts that, at least picture-wise, looked like they are satisfying my basic requirements. And I stumbled on this one, thanks to a buddy of mine from Aaron from Anarchy Outdoors. He goes, "Have you seen this mount?" I'm looking at the pictures, go, okay, clamp good, ring halves good. Let's take a look. So I reached out to Craig, and well, fast forward a few months, and here we are. Okay. So, Craig, now I'll let you talk a little bit about the mount if you want. If not, we can move on to other things. Entirely up to you.
So when we got into the mount, the core function of the mount, obviously, is to hold the optic to the rifle in the most repeatable way possible, with the caveat that it needs to allow the optic to work in the most efficient way that it can. I've been shooting for not as long as, surely everyone in the chat's been shooting longer than me, but I started shooting competitively in 2016. And at that point, we were entering this age of the really cool new optics. You know, if you want to go back to 2008, 2010, you've got like your Leupold Mark IV is kind of your standard. And there wasn't, you might have like a Gen 1 Razor, some of these other products. The real resurgence of, and almost all of the modern optics that are your new whiz-bang items, it just started to happen in the late 2010s. But what that also meant is bigger magnification ranges, more moving parts, more lenses, more mechanics inside these tubes. And we ran in early on to using different mounts, subtleties of, well, be super careful with your torque, because you know this, Ilya, and your audience likely does as well. But inside, this is a College 328. In any magnified optic with a zoom right here, you've got 2 lenses that basically have to move up and down as you adjust your magnification range. So you've got a lot of moving parts inside this tube. Up here, you might have things that are moving with your parallax, other focus. You have a lot of things moving inside. And I learned very early that if you create too much force on a main tube, you start to bind things up. We would start to see optical problems that weren't any fault of the optic, rather it was just being squeezed really hard. And we felt like we needed to do that to keep an optic still. So how do we create the most grab possible with the least stress possible? When you get down into what's happening on the bottom, we want to keep it simple. It needs a grab wheel. You talk about wet torque. The first time I ever heard somebody talk about wet torque was from a dear friend of mine, and we're talking about our mounts, but I also respect everything he does. And Hawkins Spur, Hawkins talked about grease the size of your pick rails, and he went into a Facebook explanation in which all the internet experts told him he didn't know what he was talking about. And it was talking about how you lose so much of the grab value on your pick rail just because when you take anodized aluminum, it's inherently fairly rough. And if you start dragging anodized aluminum with torque on these angles, a significant portion of the torque that you're putting into your screws is actually just being wasted on friction. So, all we need is a mount to do.
I'm sorry for the interruption since I've mentioned this. It's not so much that the torque is wasted on the friction. The problem is that if there is enough friction, you may not torque it all the way. From a clamp geometry standpoint, the claw might not get to the spot where it's supposed to be. When you start shooting, it will start shifting around, right? It's not that you're wasting torque, you're just not
under the stress.
You're just not getting to the right geometry.
So, the optic simply needs to hold the optic needs to be held onto the rifle in exactly the same spot with consistency and low stress. It is, as you say, very, very simple. Now, we also like thoughtful things in design, like when you drop your caps down, they want to move around, rotate around with indication pins. John's like, if we have indicating and guide pins behind me on dozens of fixtures. We should just use these. Let's put mount points all over it. And we don't exactly know everything that's going to go in these mount points. Let's put them everywhere. With diving board mounts, we know that a lot of the diving board mounts, weapons mounted laser rangefinders have been around for quite some time, but they've become more popular again. You've got like your Impact 4000 coming out. There's new stuff from Mars, from Wilcox. Let's make a really bomb-proof top mount, whether it's for a pick rail or it's for an RMR, whatever you want to put on top. So we started to add all these things together, and then kind of the final point, the one that made the most difference is you talked about circularity, or cylindricity. That's not a word. Circularity of this inner tube. How do we make it perfect? So we're in a world where we've got amazing equipment that runs in here all the time, but it is not without limitation. And working through, we make tens of thousands of parts a week in various forms and functions. And we know that even with the best machines money can buy, they're not all the same. They're not all perfect. So the final step here that we're taking, and we don't have any in final bore. I grab one off the machine. We put the mount after anodized, so we leave a little material in when we're machining these. Right now, I'll go pull one off in a second. We're doing Op 1 on the bases. We leave material in here. We leave material in here. Send them out to anodize. Bring them back. Put them back in the machine as sets. We put little ground shims between, because you need that space between the top cap and the base. And we put them back in the machine and we bore them together. So this is a single inline bore that is the correct size that runs in one single pass through there. We don't know of a way that we can possibly make a rounder mounting surface that is more straight and square to itself. If there's one, let us know. We'd love to do it. But what that's left us with is a product that when you drop an optic into it, your grab is significantly more uniform around that circular optic tube than it could be in any other way. We can make sure that our internal dimension is extremely consistent. You can spec anodized thickness all you want. If you work in manufacturing, you understand that spec thickness and real thickness can be very different things. And we also know that with the raw aluminum internal, you get quite a bit more grab on that optic with the same amount of overall stress going onto the tube itself. So if you're looking at like 18 to 20 inch pounds, which is what optic manufacturers seem to want, how do you get the most friction onto the optic possible inside that 18 to 20 inch pound kind of window? Well, this is it. And again, if somebody's got a better way, good on them. This is the best one we found, and we've tested that over and over in different settings. We posted a video this afternoon to Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, whatever, where we took this, and I'll explain more about this in a second, and put a custom steel target on the front. Thank you, Big Dog Steel. Put it in a mount and started shooting at it. And we've done tests before where we torque on it really hard, or we pull it really hard with a skid steer, and we're talking thousands of pounds of pressure. This time we decided to just use firearms to do it, put a steel plate on the front AR-500, start shooting at it from 50 yards, and then went to progressively larger cartridges to figure out where's this thing going to fail. We'll release the full video tomorrow, but it took from 50 yards, a 6.5 Creedmoor to the face with no slippage, and we did finally have a small amount of slippage with a 308. So we're talking almost 20. I think it was almost 2,400 foot pounds of energy that landed on target before we saw even the tiniest amount of movement in the tube. One of the other reasons that I brought this with me, and every time you touch it, you lose some of the aluminum that rubs off.
Okay, Craig, hold on one sec. I want to do an experiment. I found that short. I want to see if it's going to play. Oh, there we go.
It's doing it.
So, who's shooting?
That's Nathan from our shop.
That's Nathan. All right, so you've got a rod that you clamped in the mount. There is a little target plate on it. You said 50 yards away?
Yep.
All right, and you're just having fun over there.
Yeah,
well, so Nathan is having fun. The rest of you are shaking your boots. Okay.
We had run the test. We start with 223, shoot 22 arc, shoot 6 dasher, 6.5 Creedmoor, 308. We work our way up. And after we get done with it, we've got some ammo left. And Nathan says, I wonder what happens if I mag dump. I said, shit, man, there's only one way to know. Send it. Bryce, roll the cameras. And this is our teaser. Realistically, this is not the most difficult thing that we asked the mount to do during this test. But and somebody in the comments of anywhere I post this is going to argue that this test is stupid and it's irrelevant. But the reality is there is a fair amount of force that enters an optic whenever you pull the trigger. And I don't care if you're shooting, really the nasty one, which you'll know this. Ilya, and optic manufacturers multiple have told us this. What's the nastiest thing you can do at an optic? What's the worst rifle you can put it on?
Well, so what optics manufacturers think and what is the truth is not always the same. But the conventional wisdom really hates the scars and the springers and all that because you get weird recoil going in all sorts of directions.
Yeah, so spring powered like BB guns and pellet rifles seem to be a common killer of optics. You've got so much odd force moving back and forth, whether you're shooting a bolt gun or something spring powered or a SCAR or whatever. This is a cool way for us to illustrate that there's a lot that happens. We tested ours. We tested another one of the common mounting solutions on the market, a common one that people would consider a premium good, and that one started to slip and fail at 22 arc. We started to slip and fail at the 308. I mean, it's a significant difference in what you can get as far as grab on a tube without excessive pressure when you just do it the right way.
So, as far as spring piston air guns go, it seems like with modern scopes, it's not really much of an issue anymore. But the SCAR is a relatively well-known scope killer, and it's not only because recoil goes back and then forward, because that bolt carry is so heavy when it slams, there are weird vibrations. It's not just front back. A lot of it seems to be weird vibrations. I started looking a little bit into the piston air gun, piston recoil. I even bought a piston air gun just for that, and I started messing with it. Nowadays, it looks like scope manufacturers pretty much figured out how to deal with that. Almost everything seems to, even cheap
their
scopes.
Internal construction has gotten very good. Small parts are getting better.
It's not even that. They're also building them for it. They just got tired of people complaining, right? The spring thing is only, when you fix a lens and its mount, used to be you fix it on one side to hold certain recoil. Now they just fix it on two sides, and that's it. So they use two lock rings, front and back.
Another novel thing, if you care to get into it, or you can totally cut me off and stop me.
I assure you, I'm not sure about that.
I'll show you the way that we're attaching a diving board, and this is novel. This is patent pending as well.
Okay.
We really like tapers here, and we'll talk about more of that when we get into muzzle brakes. A lot of people like to attach a diving board to the top of an optic using their screws as part of their retention device. Any good mechanical mind is going to tell you that screws are meant to tighten things, not to hold things or to align things. So what we've done with our system here is we've got these are shallow taper bosses. They're in series, and we've got a big flat surface here. We took another concept basically from the machining world in dual contact, knowing that aluminum is not specifically, it's not terribly hard. You know, there is some elasticity to it under pressure. We went matched shallow tapers, and we pull them down with a screw with just enough interference that we're getting interference fit on both sets of tapers, and then we come down and we meet this large flat surface. We sent these things out to the different optics manufacturers, people doing lasers, and said, hey, feed them up, tell us, does something need to change, or these it? And the consistent feedback that we got was, look, we tested these against everything on the market. The only things that can hold up to them are the monolithic, you know, the ring that is also all one piece with the diving board, and they can hang with it obviously because it's a single piece, but it's unsurpassed. You know, we've got something that is it's modular, gives guys options. You've obviously got on yours, you can see in there a higher diving board as well as a lower diving board.
Correct. That's
You
what I
can
was
take them
going
off,
to
switch
try
them
to
back
show
and
you.
forth.
Yeah.
Or
So the lower one works really well with Impact 4000, which is kind of chunky. For some of the smaller, lighter stuff, the taller one's probably a good idea. As far as diving boards go, I started looking into that a little bit. And one of the things that I found is also the arc embrace mount. The way they do the bridge actually works very well.
Yeah, they wrap it around.
In other words, it's a nice mount, but once again, I spent a lot of time with them side by side. Ended up sticking with your mount for other reasons. But as far as the diving board goes, I think the two best ones that I've seen are yours and the Embrace.
Yeah, Ted's been a longtime friend. We have an enormous amount of respect for him. He's a brilliant guy. So you know what?
Yeah, well,
when
he
Ted decides
hates
he's
my
going to design something,
he hates my ass, so that's okay. But I like his mount. It's a nice mount. So
yeah.
But I never tried to. I've never tried to be Mr. Popular. So maybe it's a personality flaw. Being a jackass comes very naturally. At least I'm honest. Okay,
we've all got to have skills.
I'm a very opinionated jackass, and the opinionated part is what gets me out of trouble most of the time. Weirdly. Okay, so before we moved off of mounts and talk about other devices, so for what I've seen, you have the split rings done more or less in the same way. I also see bare aluminum, so they work the same way, I assume.
Let's see here. So yeah, we rolled these out first. These are the match scope rings.
Okay.
I mean, like most one piece mounts and scope rings, you will see the obvious similarities here. These are made. They're then put in the machine together, board together. We then zip tie them, take them back to the laser, serial mark them so that you know you've got a set, and then ship them. You know, these are wonderful as well.
These also have those steel posts and all that, right?
Yes, they do. Coming to the
look
top.
at me.
So the cap of this and the cap of this, that's the same part.
Same part. Okay.
So the only technological differences here, the only difference would be the top mounting point. We've kept that on the one piece mount because of how much stress you are putting back down through a system. Correct. If you start hanging stuff off a diving board, we like the extra security of the one piece mount for that.
Okay.
We've also got a full cantilever.
Okay, so that's that I haven't seen yet.
Guys.
The cantilevered are out now.
Yeah, they're out now. You can get them. This is something that we're going to release. Some of them are in the building, put together, bagged up. Others are coming. This one is 35 degrees. We've got 35 and 45 degree offsets, and then the plates that go with them. This is obviously RMR, but we'll have Delta Point Pro, Acro, the whole kind of schmear. Got a Ascendant level mount on this one. This one we've got a Spirit level, which you have as well. I've also got something new. No one has seen this, and we're not officially and then obviously our hunt rings in a 2-piece. These are narrower and don't have the attachment point, but we've still got our pins pulling down. These are quite light. off the top of my head, this set is like right at 4 ounces, so they're nice. They're uber robust. As you get into hunting rings, the amount of grab you have on an optic is severely diminished because you are typically making a thinner, lighter product, and you're also losing a lot of your thickness typically in a hunt ring. So as you start shooting these bigger, lighter magnum or heavier cartridge, lighter weight magnums that push more of that recoil force back into your optic, really great solution.
Okay, so
I've also got something brand new that nobody has seen before. Let's do you, and then we'll go back to that.
All right. So there were a couple of comments there. So generally speaking, guys, I am tracking what's in the chat box, and as opportunity, when we get to the Q&A part, I will go look through everything. Everything's going to get addressed. But there were a couple of comments that a gentleman, Yuri Gurevich, I think, said that when he was mounting a scope, nothing rotated. And then Link is asking, how do you deal with that uneven top gap that creates a cant on the diving board? Well, those steel inserts he's got in between the rings is kind of the key to that. The way you assemble this ring, you put it on these steel locating pins. And then when you tighten the screws, if you go through them in the normal order, I mean, it's possible to muscle your way into an uneven gap, but you would have to put some effort into it.
And it would be the unevenness would be quite limited.
Yeah.
I'm taking one apart so that for Link,
yeah, they're perfect. So Greg's going to show you. I assume on this narrow hunting rings, you do not have a steel insert, right?
We do.
Oh, you still put it in there?
Yes.
Okay, I want to see that.
And that's why. Where'd they go? Where'd I put them? How did I lose them? They were just in front of me. Oh, here we go. That's why we've got a little bit of a bump out on the bottom here.
I see it. And I see the top of the pin. Yeah.
Yeah, we had to make clearance for it. But Link, the way this works is I just took the cap off of this one piece that I had in my hand. These are steel dowel pins that are press fit into the bottom of the into the base of the mount itself, and then we have holes here, which are just barely tiny, just barely large enough for it to go through. Like you'll see here, I've got it sitting on here, and to get it to go on the pin, I've got a mean to right there, and I'm now lined up so I can push it down. But there's not a lot of room for you to get off. Sure, like you said, if you really wanted to, you could screw it up.
I'm sure somebody will if he hasn't already, right? Like there's always going to be that one guy somewhere out there who's going to take a sledgehammer to this thing and then complain that it doesn't work as advertised.
And if anybody does that, our policy internally is you can be an idiot one time and we'll cover you. You're an idiot twice, it's going to get expensive.
Yeah, it's not a bad policy, but it's if you know how to use a torque wrench, it's very difficult to screw up mounting one of these mounts. So first of all, if you're not sure what the torque is, if you look at there in the recesses on it, actually tells you what the torque needs to be on the cross bolts and on the ring halves.
Let's see,
it's a little bit hard to see. You know what? Yeah, there you go. You can kind of see it.
Rings 18 inch-pounds, and this one is
36.
Clamp. This says 36. This is an old one. We've revised that to 45. Through additional testing, a little more was good. Yeah.
So there's that. On the clamp screws, there's actually an order in which you're supposed to go through tightening 1, 2, 3, 4, right? It tells you. So if you pay just a little bit of attention, it's very hard to screw this up. Not impossible. Once again, I make products for the military, right? Making something idiot-proof is easy. Making something soldier-proof is very, very difficult because soldiers are not stupid. They come up with the most incredible ways to break stuff, right? Like an idiot is easy. Soldiers, very complicated. So it's possible to screw this up. It's not straightforward. It's not straightforward at all. Well, that's actually an interesting question. What is the pattern for tightening from an engineering perspective? I usually cross. Is that wrong? No, it's not wrong. So Craig probably will add something to it. The most important part from the standpoint of tightening the rings is not so much the pattern, although that matters too. It's really important not to tighten them all the way to maximum torque at once. What you want to do, you just kind of go through it in 3 or 4 steps, tighten a little bit at a time. It takes a little bit longer, but that minimizes the chance of a screw up. So,
Link, we're never going to make a product in China. We are aggressive about all the way from raw materials, uh, hardware. So one of the huge projects on these is it is all T20, all the hardware on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up buying a Swiss just to make all of these little screws and these little screws, because every one of these is 8 of those little screws. We're also making these because we wanted all of these different form factors of fasteners to all be T20. So let's buy a Swiss. Let's make our own. The focus on it being quality American raw material. And there are certain places that we don't use American things because there is something better outside. Specifically on the Zero, on a reloading press, we've got some Japanese bearings. Outside of that, it's American material. It's made here. American workers. We take an enormous amount of pride in that. Not that other people can't make great things. We've got a lot of German and Japanese machines behind us, but we think it is important to keep the product here, keep it ours, manufacture it ourselves, not only because of made in America, but damn it, we like making things. And we take a great amount of pride in, we start with a block of nothing. And hold on, I'm going to steal something off the machine. Cool party trick here.
Go for it. So while he's out, there is a question here: 6 screws versus 4 screws for the rings. So generally speaking, 6 screws is very seldom warranted. If your ring halves are well engineered and are stiff, 4 is enough, more than enough.
All right, so here's what's going on behind me. In our robot, we feed it this. This is a brick of aluminum, 775, hard stuff. The robot loads it in, and over a period of time, turns it into this guy right here. This is obviously the bottom mount, it's real shiny, for what will become a full cantilever.
Cool.
This part, once it's made, these little tabs here, if you put it in it, you can't know it, but it just vibrates here because I can break it off with one side. So that part we just broke off of this is then next put into one of these fixtures, and every one of our mounts has a little hole in it, and these are all a little bit different size. We're talking 1,000th or 2 here and there. They go into this fixture. Robot feeds the fixture. It goes in, it probes that hole, understands what size it is, so it knows what mount we're feeding it. And then the Op2 is going through and decking these surfaces, drilling and tapping, and then making the holes, as you see here.
Oh, I see it. Okay.
This part, now that it's been through Op2, it's ready to go to anodize. When it comes back from anodize, then we will take it, assemble it with shims, put taps on it, feed it back into the machine in the same fixture, and final bore it. And then once that's done, it goes back into assembly. They take the shims out, wipe it down, put it in a box, and it's on the way to your doorstep.
So that hole in the base of the mount, that's just an indicator. It's slightly different size. That's how the robot. I was going to ask you about that thing. I could not figure out what the hell it's for.
Yeah. It's some, you talk about idiot proofing. First of all, the team here on the floor I have the easiest job in the world, Ilya. I get to show up and tell people about the amazing things that the other people in the building do. Sometimes I feel like it's a scam that I get to do the easiest thing in the world. But John realizes, look, all these are different. We've got a gazillion SKUs of these scope mounts. So how about we just put a hole in all of them that are a different size, have the machine when we just tell it you're on Op2, it goes, it finds the hole, it measures it, and it says, oh, your hole's this certain size. So this is a 36 millimeter tube, 39 millimeter height, 20 MOA, full cantilever mount. All right, I know what to do now. So
very cool.
Bingo. Also, those of you watching, I meant to mention this earlier. We have a sale starting this weekend, and it's technically started early. If anybody wants a code, I'll drop it in the chat for 10% free shipping through the weekend.
Oh, excellent. All right. So for those of you who are listening, I know there are always a few people who are listening and not watching. The code is Warmup 419, WARMUP 419, 10% off, free shipping through Monday. Excellent.
Yep.
So you dropped it as a private message. I'm gonna post it to everyone. There is a drop-down menu there, at least for me. So I'm
don't
the
have
only
one.
one who could see the code. Now it's going to everyone.
Perfect.
I appreciate the personal code, of course, but that's probably not the idea. All right.
I'll give you a long-term one for, we'll hook up a DLO code.
Oh, there we go.
Remind me about once we get past Cyber Monday, ping me, and we can do one for your audience.
Okay, I actually appreciate that. I have a few companies who have done that, and it's always a nice thing.
Yeah.
Ultimately, all the YouTubers and stuff, I do quite a lot with affiliate accounts and all that, and I do as well. But my long-term goal is to walk away from all of it. I run a subscription website. I appreciate you guys supporting me. My loyalty is to my audience only. Long term, this is what I want to do. I want to negotiate with a few manufacturers, get discount codes specifically for my paying audience, and that's it. And I don't accept marketing. I don't accept advertising, and I don't even like the affiliate thing. I'll get rid of it as soon as my audience gets big enough. So, okay, so well, that's actually a good question, right? Before we move on to other stuff, Mr. Blind Spotter has a question here. I hear some argue that 7075 versus 6061 is just marketing, and it all depends on design. I'd like to get Craig's take on it.
Different materials with different properties. So there are things that 6061 does better. Realistically, 6061 is easier to cut. It's soft. It doesn't eat tools. It's really forgiving. But 7075 is a little bit stronger material, not enormously. This is not aluminum versus titanium versus steel, but 7075 is a little more rigid. It tends to do a little bit better with threads. So we use 7075 when we need it, and when we don't, we don't. So if somebody's making something out of 7075, it is typically them doing something in a little bit more difficult way, not enormously, but a little bit more difficult way because they want that little bit of additional strength. 7075 costs a little more. You can't really get extrusions with it. So upsides and downsides to 7075. But there are different materials and different properties. If a quality manufacturer is choosing one over another, there tends to be a reason.
I'm not a mechanical engineer. I've touched on this a little bit. Honestly, I mean, you can do slightly thinner cross sections with 7075. The biggest difference is that for threads, you can tap into 7075 and have pretty robust threads for most relatively fine threads we use. And in 6061, for almost everything you'd want to use in a scope mount, you'll need to put in helical inserts. Otherwise, those threads are not going to hold up too long if you keep on opening them up and closing them up. That's pretty much it. So. All right.
Robbie Bobby 88, that code will work for you. You just don't get the free shipping. If you want to move to the States, though, we're happy to help with that.
He means help with the mounts, not with the relocation. Okay. Okay. All right. If you don't mind, I'm gonna address this. Mr. Jared goes, I enjoy Backfire's videos. A common man's view. He just did a video on 10 scopes and found that Arnzen wasn't waterproof as advertised. Okay. I'm going to find myself in a very rare position of defending Arnzen, and it's a scope that I refuse to review because, in my opinion, they're so inconsistent, I don't want to review it. I have to be able to make recommendations. The simple fact that Mr. Backfire, I don't remember his real name, found one scope that's not waterproof means jack shit for the rest of them. Okay. That's just the truth of it. If you want to tell if it's waterproof or not, you need to get some sort of a statistically significant number of them. Short of that, testing one, it means nothing. It's one of the reasons I don't like reliability testing, that people go and break a scope or break a rudder and says, these are not reliable. That's horseshit. That just means the one you broke may have had something wrong with it, or you abused it too much or something. It means absolutely nothing for the rest of the product line. And the backfire guy, he seems like a nice guy. I nice his videos. I think he's a lawyer by trade. He uses scopes, and from an end user perspective, his reviews are perfectly reasonable. Does he know how they work? Does he know anything about inside what's breaking? No, he doesn't. Nice guy.
And on the idea of items maybe not all being right, you experience this, Ilya. It's something we experience. We've got wonderful friendships around the industry, and there are a lot of situations where somebody's coming out with a new product, and we get it 6 months before the world knows about it.
Mm-hmm.
The number of pre-production or first-run products we get that have odd, ridiculous mechanical flaws, it's really common. And most companies, especially when you're making complex goods, and I absolutely consider an optic to be a complex good, your first run is mostly figuring out how you want to make it and put it together. And when you're working through that process and building your fixturing and working through, how those guys want to do their job, sometimes you make bad parts. When we first rolled out the zero reloading press, that's been almost 5 years ago now. I think we probably made 25 of them that were just garbage before we made any that were good enough for us to send out to other people that they would then go on and break. That's just, if you're innovating and you're not making bad parts along the way, you're not trying hard enough. And that's the simple reality of trying to do new things for the first time.
So for my day job, right? So you guys build a large number of relatively inexpensive things. So by our standards, right?
Sure.
For my day job, I make all sorts of electro-optical systems, test equipment, primarily for military things, right? So I don't think we have anything that's 4 figures. We start at 5 figures and go way up, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have systems that cost millions of dollars. So for most things we make one off if it's really expensive. Two if we're lucky, because then we actually make some money on the second one. You know how difficult it is to make that whole bloody thing work properly if you're only ever going to make one or two?
Yeah, I mean, you're hoping that all your prints are right, all of your clearances and interferences are all correct. All of you hope that one engineer did the whole project. They almost never do.
No, that's
and
not,
then
that's
when,
not how this works.
and then you're going to make these parts, and stuff's not going to fit together. And then you're going to spend weeks pointing fingers, and then just make the parts fit anyway. Making complex things is hard, and it's so easy to sit on the internet if you're not somebody in manufacturing and think, well, shit, just make it the right size. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's really not straightforward. Look, for complex systems that we make, again, I'm talking about my day job.
Yeah.
For a lot of these things, we will not sell a system unless we can build in a week of on-site at the customer. We're going to build it at the factory. We build stuff in Israel. Then we're going to bring in US. We'll build it up, reassemble everything in our office in US, test everything again, take it apart, get it to the customer, assemble it there again, and hang out there for a few days to make sure it all works and the customer knows how to use it. That's the problem with building one-off or two-off systems. So I am deeply sympathetic to scope manufacturer who gets slammed when it's not their fault. Lord knows they screw up enough things and get slammed for that. Ripping them a new one for something that's just random, that's just unfair.
Yeah.
So, very cool. All right, so Mr. Northwest Guns is here. Derek, good to see you, my friend. All right, so what else did we have in our plans? I think we beat the scope mount business more or less to death, unless
I do have something no one's ever seen before. Little DLO
okay, let's do
here.
that.
So we'll release in Q1, and I'm not going to go too deep here. This is a modular riser. Like this is Aimpoint. This one is just
I see what you mean.
EOTech style pick riser with modular and very, very stable and rigid attachment point. Like this is a short pick rail. This is a long pick rail. Something, and this isn't complete. We've got Rev 2 to play with here.
Okay.
We like the idea of being able to make optic mounts to take you from your carbine to your hunting rifle to your competition rifle. We want to have all of it, and we think that this is a cool system. We'll talk a lot more about this in coming months. I'm not going to go significantly deeper than that, but you were nice enough to have me on. I'll pull up the skirt a little bit.
Okay, so that's interesting. So that's a little laser thing on the front. It's just below the optical axis of the EOTech, right?
Yeah. So this is a laser. This could be
Got it.
illumination. This could be visible light. This could be IR. Whatever you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
This keeps all of your mounting on the same surface.
Nice.
Typically, your dot is going to be relatively far forward on your AR receiver. So having all of these in one platform is nice.
Excellent.
It being modular is also
So
handy, and various center sections will exist. We've also got on this one our little match mounting point. If you remember this guy
yeah.
in the rings and mounts, it also exists here.
Oh, excellent.
Various options. We understand that we have no understanding of all the ways people will use things. So we're going to give you every opportunity to get as weird as you want.
That is very cool. I like it. That's interesting. All right, but bring it with you to shot. I want to see that. That's interesting.
I'll just ship you one.
All that.
We can still drink. We can still drink in Vegas, but I'll ship you one as well.
Yeah. Oh, the silly American thinks he's going to drink with me.
No. Only literally, not figuratively.
One of the traditions for the DLO live stream, at some point I pull out one of these and things really get fun. The funny thing is that I'm not really a drinker, far from being an alcoholic. But my one vice is that the stuff I drink tends to be so expensive, I can't afford to become an alcoholic. But I'll drink to that.
Cheers, my friend.
Anyhow, so what is the optical axis height above the top rail? With the for the EOTech. Central line of the EOTech is how high above the rail?
I don't know that offhand. I should know that number, but I'm in dev on this one. By the time we launch it, I'll know that offhand.
Okay, good. All right. Because it looks like it should be just right for the nice heads-up position if you're moving with the AR.
It's not the ridiculous 2+ stuff that people get into.
It looks like right around 2 inches, something like that.
Maybe I think it may be 1.9 if I'm going to pick a number. Because some people are getting into these mounts that are like 2.5, 2.7.
Yeah.
Eventually, I think with some of these mounts, you may be able to hip fire and still get a sight picture with your dot. I'm not sure how far they're going with that.
Yeah, I'm not huge on a very heads-up position. I think that's a mistake. And the basic mistake is that I'm sort of a general purpose rifle guy. And you want to be able to have a mount that you can use from a variety of shooting positions. If it only works when you're standing straight and anything else, you're screwed. That's a little limiting. But
one of our goals with this system, so this is the aim point centerpiece for it. We can produce these in different heights as well. We're going to start with basic heights and grow a system. But if you've paid attention to our products at all, and I know that your familiarity is not old and deep, but the people that have been with us for a long time know that when we start making shit, it's going to be modular, and then we're going to make a ton of parts for it. Because, like I said, we're not so ignorant to think that we actually know everything people are doing with their systems. So if we want different heights all over the place, different length boards, flip ups, we want to give you guys options and then build it to where it can go together or come apart or be fixed or altered like Legos. And then do your thing, guys.
That's it. But that is a very clever idea. I like it. Ooh, I have another idea. All right, we'll talk about that. Maybe you'll make something for me. I think that's might actually work as an extension of this mount. Okay, I need to think about that a little bit. See, now I have like this much creativity. I'm mostly an analytical guy, and you've got that little creativity that I have functioning now. Because I can think of so many alternatives that you can do with that cantilevered front rail that's a different height. Oh, that can get very clever.
I'm sorry, chat. I think we might have just broken the live stream. Might have
pretty much,
Ilya.
yeah.
We'll get him real drunk and see where this goes.
Oh, I don't have enough alcohol here to get me drunk. All right. Let's see.
So where in the Eastern Bloc did you grow up, Ilya? Where are you from?
I grew up in Russia. I grew up in Moscow. And I came here to the States as a teenager. I came here in 1991 and finished high school in Los Angeles. And I did my undergrad at Caltech in applied physics. Then went and did stuff in telecom for a while. Then I switched into imaging, so I worked on some space-based imagers here and there. Some of them.
What
Some of them know
specifically
you really
brought you
well.
here?
Immigration. I'm Jewish. When Soviet Union was collapsing, Russian Jews picked up and bolted since we could. It was. I actually came here as a refugee, right? So if you want to get into politics, I do politics here, right? The people who hate illegal immigration the most are legal immigrants. It was so hard for us to come here. It's a
Sure.
decade-long process, right? And then we've got
Well,
people.
Yuri Gurevich, who you called out. I think you might have.
Yeah,
There might be some family name that you guys have across the line there.
yeah,
He grew up near Chernobyl, I believe,
yeah. There you
and
go.
came over as an immigrant
Yeah,
in a
that's the same
fairly
story.
similar time to you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
same story. Yeah. So there's about 500,000 Russian Jews who came here in the last decade and a half of Soviet Union's existence. About 2 million went to Israel, about 500,000 or so ended up in the United States, and a few went all over the world. So, but anyhow, my whole immigrant story is something best told over a drink. Like how I got from middle of Moscow to Albuquerque. Yeah,
Yuri's
in
here. Came in '89.
there you go. I came in 1991. So a lot of my friends came in the late 80s. So
Yeah,
it's been interesting. Last month in October, we celebrated. It was exactly 33 years since we landed in the United States, and we landed on my older brother's birthday. So we have two celebrations in one day.
that's right.
Yuri goes to Australia and Italy too. Yeah. So when Yuri came here, he probably had to go through Italy. What Russian Jews used to do, since you could getting out of Soviet Union and getting into wherever you were going were two separate processes. So you got out of Soviet Union, went in the holding pattern in Italy, and from there you were figuring out if you're going to yes or to Israel to wherever, sometimes to Australia, and then that. So he says he's from Ukraine, so he went to Austria, from Austria to Italy. In Italy, they hung out probably for 2 to 6 months, and then ended up coming, in his case, to the United States. We were ready to go that route, and then it was one of the many tricks our friendly people at KGB played on us. They stopped that in their tracks, and we had to go through other means. And while we were in a holding pattern in the Soviet Union, the rules changed, and you could go directly to the United States. So we boarded the last transatlantic flight by Pan American. Again, not without a few adventures. Ended up living in an airport for a week or so. That's another story. Then the plane, one of the engines caught fire. We had an emergency landing somewhere in the North Atlantic.
Is it you that they based the Tom Hanks movie Terminal on? I need to know.
I have not seen the movie, but chances are no.
Tom Hanks is an Eastern Bloc immigrant that's coming across, gets
Mhm.
stuck because as he's working his way through customs, the nation that he came from ceased to exist,
Mhm.
which is
Okay.
it seemed to be a popular thing, I guess, as the Eastern Bloc is caving. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah. No.
the
So
story of
this
living
one
in the
was
airport.
different. It was KGB playing tricks on us when getting out of Soviet Union. It's not like you buy a ticket and get in a plane. They don't just let you out, right? There is a list. There's an organization that's getting Jews out. There's a list. There's a plane. There's one plane available once a day, and there's a list of people who are on it. Everybody's already technically has tickets and everything. So we sell all belongings, $40 a person, one bag a person. Go to Sheremetyevo airport. They read out the list. We're not on it. I go, okay. So we spend the day and the night, five of us, my parents, my brother, and I, and our 80-year-old grandma, sleeping on benches. Next day, there is a list, there is a plane, we're not on it. So this goes on for a week or so. And so the KGB was playing the last joke on us. Then my dad had to drive back to Moscow. Moscow airport is outside the city. Go talk to somebody. I don't know who he bribed, but we finally got on the list. And that's the last time I set foot in Russia, and I'm good with that. Stays that way. So, but anyhow, it's
Link, not quickly. So
yeah.
Arrow is a good example in the precision action market specifically. Not so much barrels, the actions.
Mm-hmm.
There is an intense battle happening now around who can put together the most feature-rich package at $800, and we don't know how that's going to shake out. Could we make actions? We'd have to buy a wire. We could, but it's not in our immediate. It's not in our immediate plan because whatever these guys are going to work out, and it's Aero, it's the less expensive Defiance product. You know, you've got Impact now making a round body, and it's not one of these $900 actions, but it's packing more value into something that's a little less expensive to produce. That's going to be a race, not to the bottom, but a race to, you know, who's ready to narrow margins and pinch one another. We're going to watch that battle. We're not going to get in the middle of it.
I looked at it recently for a little bit, and you know, there are, unless you are a very, very serious competitor, you just want the bragging rights. From a practical standpoint, it's very difficult to justify one action over the other. The differences are becoming so small. So I have an Arrow gun here. Well, it's technically a Stag Pursuit bolt gun and 6.5 PRC, which I like a fair bit. It shoots very well. It is quite nice. I mostly shoot Q rifles, the fix. You know, I love those. But for a normal, sane person, can I justify the price difference between that and just buying a Tika T3X and dropping it in a chassis and eventually putting a different barrel on it? This gets tough because it's not just action manufacturers that keep on getting better. And as Craig said, they're trying to squeeze more value into a certain price point, right? The rifle manufacturers are not exactly snoozing either. It's been years since I've seen a Tika that didn't shoot straight from the factory.
They make
right?
a great rifle.
Yeah, I know. And there are others, right? So there is that Spanish gun. What's that? Always forget the
Vergara.
name of. Yeah, Bergara and a few others. I don't think they're quite as consistent, but most of them shoot, and there are several others. It's a tough market. Like I said, I wouldn't get into the action barrel market now. Honestly, it's
and
too much happening.
I obviously love Area 419 products. I don't think anybody on the planet is making better products than we are. But I'm also not so ignorant to think or to not even talk about the idea that in any product line, there is a series of people making really exceptional goods.
Yeah.
We talked about scope mounts. Hawkins Spur is a good friend and an excellent man and a brilliant guy. He makes a great scope mount. You brought up Dave President.
Boy, do we disagree on this one. I've seen more problems with spur mounts with all other high-end mounts put together. And
I also
for a
think
reason,
they've sold more than everyone put together as well.
That is true, and it's not just me. There are scope manufacturers that will actively discourage people from buying spur mount. And it's basically because of one thing, right?
The bars on the side, like cracking in those, is that what you're talking about? They have that
no. So that's the problem that you see. The problem that you don't see, for the ring shaft, the screws he uses have conical heads. And what happens when the scope ring shafts cannot self-align on the scope tube? If anything is slightly out of spec, when you tighten those screws, the conical head will try to pull the ring halves in whatever direction the screw needs. Well, what you want, yeah, go ahead.
Even if you disregard Hawk, even if you disregard Spur, but they're the monster in the game. You talk about David Gray Ops; he's making a good product.
Yeah, that's by all accounts a good mount.
And Andy Hawkins at Hawkins, he makes a great product. There are really good products, whether it's scope mounts or it's brakes or it's actions or it's barrels. In all of these independent elements, there are several options that I would consider truly premium elite. There is also then this next level of also really good that is becoming so much thicker than 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you could have ever imagined. 2016, 17, that region was a big turning point for precision rifle because we had three things happen in a short period of time. And the market went bonkers. So Hornady's 6.5 Creedmoor cartridge starts to really exist on the shelf. Ruger releases the RPR, which for all of its flaws, maybe it was incredibly feature rich, and it was $1,000.
Yep.
And the movie American Sniper goes into theaters and is massively successful. So every Midwestern dude that sits at a desk for a living goes, I can do that. And they get excited. And you can take $1,500, you buy an RPR, you go buy like a what was it, a Vortex PST,
Mm-hmm.
and a box of 6.5 Creedmoor ammo, and you can pick all of those things up at your local Cabela's or Shields or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and you can go shoot 1,000 yards in a day immediately,
Very true.
and you're interested in doing so because of the entertainment market. And when this kind of happened, lots of people start paying attention quickly. You know, you get into premium brands. This is about the time that, you know, we start making a lot of parts here. You got a guy like Glenn Seekins who is doing well to make parts in his own right. Jared Joplin at APA, you know, he's making good parts in his own right.
Mm-hmm.
All of these custom gunsmiths start happening. Defiance really grows. Bartland, you know, Manners,
Mm-hmm.
all of these companies start happening. And what we've seen in the last, you know, 8 years since call it 2016 is more people have decided I can make these too. The Truett family out of Oklahoma that does foundation stocks.
Mm-hmm.
There may not be finer people on earth than John Kyle and Amy Lynn. And he comes from a machining background. He's like, I'm going to make these out of micarta. Excellent material. We've got more great options.
Mm-hmm.
People start making really good chassis products. Then we are experiencing an embarrassment of riches when it comes to the choices that we have, both in an also really good price point and in that excellent price point. And while again, I think the things that we make are unsurpassed, I also know that if you're a buyer, if you want to get into precision rifle today, there's never been a better time.
That is very true. So I am going to generally agree with you. I think mid-range stuff in all aspects of the shooting game is becoming extremely good.
I
But
agree.
the price difference between mid-range and high-end for a rifle is hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars,
Mhm.
right? So I was having a chat with my nephew, and you know, I'm going to shoot. I'm not a competition shooter, but I'm going to shoot my first NRL Hunter match in January. I've been shooting for a very, very long time, but you know, I have fairly young kids. That's my excuse. I have many excuses. My basic problem: I like to play with gear so much that I'm not as good of a shot as I should be.
Sure.
So, but anyhow, and I'm looking at it, and my rifle is very, very expensive, right? And the difference between a TIC and the rifle I shoot is $2,000. The difference between a scope that most normal people shoot and the one I use is $4,000, right? But the difference between the mid-range mount and the high-end mount is 150 bucks.
Yeah.
Okay. Percent-wise, yeah, it's a big difference. In terms of peace of mind difference, you know, when I went on this mount holy grail search, I basically said, okay, I want to find truly good rings that are under 100 bucks for split rings. I want to find a truly good single piece mount that's under 200 bucks. And I found several mid-range ones that are perfectly serviceable, but I have not found anything for $200 that's as good as a true high-end mount, right? Excepting the spur that I don't like, right? I'm gonna bring this up a lot now.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, no. It's
I
I'm an equal opportunity abuser. Everybody gets some, but
I think
I
Link is in the comments afraid that you're going to berate him and put him in a cage. He
who
made a
me?
comment along those lines earlier. Something
No.
like, I knew the abuse I was here for.
Really?
It was funny whenever he said it.
Okay. I'm sorry, I missed that one. Mm, all right, I will get to it later. So that was probably about collars because he asked a question about collars. So if my
Oh, okay.
body is
I got
ever
you.
found floating dead in a ditch, Night Force and collars will be among the top five suspects. They don't like me. I like their products, but I've had some significant disagreements with the company. And
I think so. He asked earlier about the 328. If
mhm,
you've been behind one, I'm assuming you've been behind one of these.
yes,
Um, this is a cool optic. You're the optic guy. I'm not gonna make any bold claims, but the field of
you can
view in
make
this is the field of view is preposterous. It is outrageously large. It is unbelievable. The
you're
only other
talking
thing
about
I've ever
3 to 28.
yes, this is the
Yes.
the
Yeah, that's
328.
a 328. Yes, it is the
Um,
largest available in a precision scope.
and
And they
then
did a really, really good job with the eyepiece. Making a wide field of view eyepiece that's that well corrected is legitimately difficult.
oh yeah, and
And
the one that they're going to release at Shot, I've got one elsewhere,
yeah,
and it's a family member to this.
mhm.
What they've done with the enormous magnification range and the eyepiece, which gives you a field of view that's just comical. as well as an eye box. It's very, very useful. It's impressive. I thought their 525 was a little bit underwhelming, to be honest with you. I loved the 624 at the time. I thought it was excellent. The 525 didn't do it so much for me. This is really cool. The one that they're going to release soon is unbelievable. I'm
the
glad they're back with
5 is
great
why
games.
they don't like me.
Huh?
So no, so just to be clear about Kalis, it comes up here and there. Kalis Swarovski, I think they make very good products for the most part. I didn't like the 5 to 25. I was very impressed with the 3 to 28. I have some ideological issues with how they do some of their IP, so I don't review Kalis products.
I'm going to pimp another product.
Is with the company, not with the scope.
So for this optic specifically, we made what we call our mid cantilever mount. And as you see here, our mounting shoes are here. And then we push forward the rings because what's happening on this, and it's happening with a lot of the higher magnification range, big tube optics, is your distance from your erector housing to your appropriate eye relief location is getting really long. So you need forward cantilever if you're using a traditional receiver where the rail only extends to the end of the receiver. I don't know, unless you've got some odd things going with your eyes, it would be really, really difficult to mount this with traditional rings on a traditional receiver. So as soon as we got the first one, we got one of the early ones of these several months before they announced the product. And immediately the cries came to, oh no, we got to mount this thing further forward. So we released in various configurations this mid cantilever, which is still low like a bolt gun mount, but pushes that optic forward a little bit. So when you need that extra half an inch of eye relief, that's a lot of eye relief that if you need it and don't have it, you're going to really want it. So this is another option in our mount line, our mid cantilever product.
So I'll say another good thing about Kalis here. When I saw that scope, they unapologetically made a scope they wanted to make, and they assumed that making a mount for it is going to be more straightforward than for them to try to shoehorn a very complicated design into a more balanced form factor that works with existing mounts. That's just good judgment. Mounts, once you know how to make a good mount, it's relatively easy to change it a little bit, move the rings around a little bit, move the clamps around a little bit.
Changing what happens inside here is so much more difficult than changing what's happening back there.
So Kalis, it's a 3.5 to 28. It's a true 8x erector, meaning it's true 8-time magnification ratio. It doesn't tunnel, and on top of it, the way they balance the image quality, it's actually very consistent across magnification range. And as the erector ratios get higher, it becomes difficult to do. So once again, kudos to Kalis on a very, very nice design. So there's no question, it's a very nice design. So we'll see. All right. So let me quickly look through the comments, see if anything mount related is missed, and then I really want to talk about muzzle brakes.
Sweet.
Because I'm curious. I know you guys started with the Hellfire. You have other options now, and I am really curious how it all works. We talked about it a little bit, but this is a good discussion to have. So Jared earlier asked a question that we hear a lot about scopes, but not as much about mounts. What's the difference between a good versus great scope mount? We talked about that actually quite a lot, but a good scope mount is the one that gives you problems once in a while, and a great scope mount is the one that never gives you any problems. In a nutshell, that's the difference. Okay. Yuri Gurevich talks about mounting. We talked about that. Well, here's kind of an interesting question about scopes. And you're a precision shooter, so I'm gonna throw this one on you. It's from Jared. He goes, I don't even consider a scope if I don't like the reticle. It's what I consider first. Am I alone in this?
So Nathan in our shop is the most picky, just hard to deal with. Ilya, you would be tired by how picky he is on reticles. And you're a picky guy.
Well, I also design reticles for people, so now I want to talk to Nathan. I'm very curious.
Oh, yeah, he's your guy there. I can bring him some optic that's truly unbelievable, optically, truly unbelievable mechanically, and he'll look at it sitting at his desk, looking at a bright spot on the wall and say, "I hate it. Why? I don't like how they arrange the subtensions between 0 and 1. All right. I don't like that they didn't label things a certain way. Great. We're going to do at some point a rundown on some optics, and we'll take a lot of your larger powered stuff and do a comparison video similar to what we did with the laser range finding binoculars. And we're going to do an entire section on Nathan just being pissed off about reticles, because reticles are they're very personal. It's how do you use them? How do you think is also important here. I'm not a picky reticle guy. I think that, there are bad reticles, but many of them can be learned and adjusted to with relative ease. Some people simply do not want to adjust, and they're going to be pissed off, and they are reticle first people. So, no, whoever that was in the chat, you're absolutely not alone.
Yeah, that's Jared. So I started designing reticles for different scope companies because the stuff that was out there was not good enough, in my opinion. And that gave me a chance to going through several generations of reticles to zero in on what really works for me. And my reticles tend to do fairly well in the market. But there are quite a few reticles out there that I can use comfortably, and there are some that are just bad. I adjust to them relatively well, but the significant number of well thought out reticles that exist now did not exist 10 years ago.
Sure.
When I started doing this, it was not enough out there. Now, if I just joined this market now, I probably wouldn't be so motivated to get into the reticle design business.
Yeah. All of your either, true elite tier or you're also really good tier. All those optic companies have stuff that's pretty useful.
It's fairly decent. Once again, there are some that I think are just bad idea, but they are commercially successful, so people keep doing them. But it's marketing and actual use are different things.
Yeah.
So okay, we're fine there. I'm just glancing through the chat. We answered this. We talked about backfire. Enough of that. I shouldn't be disparaging other YouTubers, but then again, I warned everybody I'm an opinionated jackass, and I have to live up to that. Robbie Bobby goes, I can see DLO drooling over there, Craig. You definitely got his attention with that new mount. Yes, you did. I like clever ideas. I'm partial to clever ideas and good engineering.
Appreciate
and
that.
remember, right, a bunch of things I worked on. Orbiting the Earth right now, looking at your license plate. I've been around a lot of very complicated designs. I can't tell you how many of them went to orbit and went like, why did we do that?
Air enthusiast, you asked about the machining marks on top of the caps. Yeah. We think it looks cool. So we are product designers first, and that we want the products to be good, to work well, to be properly made, to be bank vault solid. We want you to be able to buy it, use it, and never think about it again if you don't have to. That said, we also like making beautiful parts. If we've got to make something, we might as well make it attractive. Nobody looks at their rifle and says, damn, I wish that thing were uglier. If we can make a part that's also attractive and has something, the machining marks, we make our stuff. And we like the idea that we are making our stuff. It's not stamped out. It's not some, extrusion that we're barely finishing. It's not, we're not pounding something together or MIM or whatever. I don't know. We design parts that we think look cool.
I like the look, but again, I have the artistic sensibilities of a tree stump, so I'm not a good judge of that. So let's do the last question on mounts from Blind Spotter. He goes, I see some pretty crazy cantilevers on mounts these days. Some people seem to like using them even when it's not needed. Are you giving anything up using them in terms of toughness or rigidity? Thoughts?
I'm not. If I need cantilever, I'm going to use it. If I don't, I'm not. And knowing just what we've gone through and figuring out how to make these products in a way that rigidity is, these guys behind me are excellent truth finders on rigidity. And the fact of the matter is, when you hang something further off of its base, it does in fact become less rigid. Now, having appropriate eye relief is going to mean more to the shooter. But yeah, I mean, you start hanging something further and further forward, you obviously lose relative rigidity. So if you need it, use it, and if you don't, don't. I don't think that's a controversial one, especially from a
It's not
mechanic standpoint.
controversial, but I'm gonna make it a little bit controversial as always.
Okay.
So the whole very long cantilever stuff mounts started when people who were used to ACOGs were running their stocks very short, putting their nose to the charging handle, and using low power variables with 4-inch eye relief. So the scope had to be pushed way forward. It seems to a good degree to be going away, but quite a few very long cantilever mounts were absolutely not rigid enough. Not because they can't be rigid, because people who designed them didn't think about it. I've seen mounts where I can bend them with my hands. Okay. And they kind of work because once you clamp the scope in there, now you end up with a much more rigid structure. But the scope body is a part of the rigid structure. You really do not want to depend on the rigidity of the scope body to handle this. The mount is supposed to alleviate these stresses from the scope. There have been quite a few very long cantilever mounts where they made them rigid enough and they work fine. The trend with modern rifle scopes, especially for AR-15s, where this really started, is towards shorter, more compact designs. I think we are going to not need very long cantilevers in the future for the most part. So
Yeah, we didn't go terribly long here.
yeah.
Many of them are much longer than this,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but to your point, the need for them is
It's slowly
so.
going away. Slowly going away. Okay. So so Lee, stay on targets. Sorry if I missed it. And tell me if I should watch back, but why doesn't anyone make a functionally really good scope mount? Not god
First off,
level.
you should watch back no matter what. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, thank you. For a price that is less than half of really good, not god level, a Glock 19 clone. That's actually a good comparison. There is
Anything but the
nothing.
metric system, right? No.
Yeah, there is nothing in a Glock 19 clone or the Glock 19 that's done with anywhere near the precision of what you have in a good scope mount. That's just that. So you can make a Craig should probably address this. You can make a scope mount for less money. It's hard to do so in the US. It's hard to make a truly fully featured one because there is actually quite a lot that goes in there.
Features and consistency and how you make it are the things that you start to shave off most quickly when you start pulling price down. So if we wanted to make this half price, what are the things that we would have to do? You start to lose, attachment points. You lose the way that we're doing this internal bore, and you would also probably lose some of the weight management things, some pocketing. You start to lose those features. So can you have something that from a mount standpoint itself is rigid? Sure. There are, like you talked about, in that $150 class, there's some stuff that's okay. But when you start looking at what really makes a scope mount excellent, where you never have to worry about it, it starts to come down to some consistency in manufacture that it takes more time, takes more energy, it's more steps, it's more expensive. And then the ability to do pseudo custom things with like attachments and features, that's where you start to get into that price point that compared to our peers, we cost less than some of the elite peers. We felt strongly that we could make the sufficient margins that we need to make to grow and be profitable because we are a business, not a charity. And we didn't have to be the most expensive mount on the market. So we picked the right price, not simply the highest price, even though I think we could probably command a higher price. We priced it.
I'm not going to comment on it. I've once recommended to an optics manufacturer to price their product higher. They did, and I got slammed for it. So I no longer comment on that.
Appropriate is the number you got to go for.
Yeah. Once with the mount manufacturer that I'm relatively friendly with, at least used to be, I tried to figure out why there was some number of the mounts that I saw where the rings were a little bit out of round, which seemed to be unusual, and size was off. And we were able to track it down to the fact they needed to build this thing to a price point. The tools you use in a lathe, in a machine, are wear. And in a certain stage of where the tool is a little bit worn, the sizes were starting to get wonky, but that still went through QC because the differences were not big enough for them to catch, but big enough where it was doing bad things to rifle scopes. So this is
boring versus interpolating is important as well. So, Ilya, you obviously know the difference in boring and interpolation in machining. But for those of you that don't, so when you need to make a cylindrical hole, if you do what's called boring, you're taking a single tool with a cutter on the end, spinning it, and you're basically boring a hole as you go through. Interpolation is where you take your tool like an end mill and you spin it really fast, and then you move it in a circle like this. That's interpolation. Interpolation tends to be cheaper. You can do it in process. You can do it in your individual components. The other option that you have is to make, and you can bore not the full cylinder, but your halves separately. You want to make a mount cheaper. You make your caps totally complete parts, and you anodize and bring them back and assemble them. You make your mount totally complete parts. When we go to Op2 here, Op1 gets us a product that doesn't have your holes in the top because we're doing it this way. If we wanted to, we could make these holes and we could go through and bore, send this thing out to anodize, bring it back, pack it up, ship it, made it to something that we hope is correct. When you're talking about out of round, if the tool boring your caps and the tool boring your base have different amounts of wear, we've got problems. So when we start talking about why do things cost more, why do you need to make a more complex product, it's error reduction. It's by sheer will of process working your way into greater consistency.
correct. And here's the funny thing about rings. Everybody keeps on thinking that what screws things up is when it's the diameter is too large or too small. That's not what screws it up. So Craig talked earlier about circularity. There's also concentricity. Most of the problems with clamping the scope happen when you have two ring halves because of the way they're machined, end up a little bit like this. That's when you've tightened it and it all looks good, and then it slips. And in the process where you're tightening it, it's producing asymmetric pressure on the scope tube that does wonderful, unpleasant things to all the optics inside. All of that happens. Go ahead.
So these holes right here in Operation 2 decide exactly where that cap's going to sit on top, because these caps are basically made in a manner where all of your critical surfaces are done in one operation. The only thing left on these caps when we break them off the tabs is a little tab that attaches right up in here. So all of your critical surfaces are done in one operation. Our caps are perfect. When you refixture things, though, that's when you find error or issue with these machines, because your fixturing does a really good job, but perfection's an unattainable thing. So when we punch these holes, they're in really good locations, but the idea that there can be a little bit of float or a little bit of variance, that's real. So when we come back and reassemble them and then bore them, any variance that could exist this way, it doesn't matter anymore because we bored our way into it.
Now, with your process, it's impossible to get that error, but that's the error I see. Well,
it's so common.
That's the second most common error with good quality scope mounts. The most common is then when the top ring halves are made too flexible. So as you tighten them, they deform, and that guarantees you are going to have bad contact and asymmetric pressure on the scope tube. That's the most common. So. Okay. All right. Last question on mounts, and I want to talk about muzzle devices. From F-Class Rob, might be a dumb question and a bit off topic. When using individual rings to mount an optic, do you try and keep them as close as possible to each other on the peak rail, or do you try to space them? So yes, no, and maybe. If you have very high quality rail, try to space them out as much as possible. If the Picatinny rail that you got is a little suspect, then you probably want to keep them a little closer together. Not all rails are created equal. Many are out of spec, many are not straight. So if you have a suspicion that your rail might not be as straight as it's supposed to be, then you want the rings to be closer together.
But all right, I'm going to give you my thought on how to do this, and I want you to tell me where I'm wrong and where I'm right. So here's what I suggest to people on two-piece rings. I want you to soft mount everything. So without torque, put the whole system together.
Mhm.
I then want you to tighten the ring caps and then go back and tighten here. Reason being, the way that optic tubes are manufactured, this tube should be quite good. I also care far more about a low stress mounting system on the tube than I do on the Picatinny section. So I found that even if you got a screwy pick rail or whatever you've got going on, if you mount first to if you torque first to the tube and then to the pick section, a meaningful number of problems resolve themselves because Picatinny, as we discussed earlier, is not good anyway.
Yeah. So generally that's correct. That's a good way of that's the better way of doing this. But depending on how stiff the Picatinny rail is and how warped it is, I've seen plenty of cases where you do everything right, you do what you just said, and once you finally tighten it to the rail, it binds the side focus. Because the scope tubes are fairly stiff, they're not that stiff. And there is enough torque on the cross slots and stuff that you can potentially bind stuff. The moral of this story is that if you can't afford the really high-end stuff, buy the mid-range stuff. Stay away from the cheap crap. That's pretty much it, right? So that's where you run into the most problems. If you're buying a product for $30, it costs $2 to make. The rest is markups as you go through the distribution chain. So, all right. If there are any more questions on scopes or mounts, I'm going to look at them later. I really want to talk about muzzle devices. So, Mr. Arnzen, you started the company, well, John started the company with a Hellfire muzzle brake?
Yep. All right. So let me grab a different set of props here. All right. So the core of the Hellfire system is this guy. This is a shallow taper with a set of threads. All of our Hellfire muzzle devices, they go on. And as you start to pull down here, you see I'm not, as you get to a certain level of tightness, you feel those tapers engage. And even though we're not tight here, this thing is stuck in there. It creates on those shallow tapers quite a bit of rotational grab. So we can self-time the brakes by hand. It is a terribly easy mounting solution for people. It's versatile. You can put this little guy on the end of your rifle, and I can put this brake on. I can put this brake on. I've got mounts for suppressors that can go on it. We've got. Do I have a flash hider on me? I don't think I've got one in my prop bag, but various items, and they all connect to this little guy. But muzzle devices in a nutshell, you talk about what makes a good scope mount, what makes a good muzzle device. The point of a muzzle device is to capitalize on hot, fast, high pressure gas coming out of the muzzle to create some performance characteristic. So how are you altering that gas for pick your characteristic? If it's a suppressor, you want to slow it down. You want to get rid of that pop. You want to make it quieter. If it's a muzzle brake, you are using geometry to turn that gas in. You're redirecting it to basically act like little parachutes in here and keep that rifle from recoiling so much. If it's a flash suppressor, you're trying to mix oxygen in with what might be superheated gas to where you don't get a big fireball. So the core function of a muzzle device is to somehow change the characteristic of the rifle based on how you're manipulating that gas.
I'm listening.
And that's
it.
That's what I got. I mean,
that's it. I thought there was more complexity than that.
Well, the complexity comes from how do you want to manipulate the gas. But when we get into what makes a good optic mount, that's one you never have to think about again because it holds the optic securely and in low stress. When it comes to a muzzle device, a muzzle device in general is manipulating that gas to create some sort of performance characteristic. Now, what do you want it to do? And that conversation becomes more complex. Are you just trying to kill recoil? Are you trying to control muzzle rise? Are you trying to balance shooter ear? Flash suppressors and sound suppressors are an entirely different thing too. that's where your nuance shows up when you have something that you want to do with that gas or something you want to manipulate with that energy.
So you started with a Hellfire brake, then there's a newer one that the name of which I don't remember. What was it again?
Okay, so this is the Hellfire OG.
Okay.
This was released in October, I think, of 2016. We still sell exactly the same product, and we sell a ton of them. We then released at some point the Sidewinder.
Okay.
It's more magnum focused. It uses a larger universal adapter. This is not as much the focus as Hellfire is, because we have a ton of Hellfire devices. This larger system, you're shooting a really big, heavy magnum. It's got upside, but the Hellfire is kind of the focus. Okay, so we roll out the Hellfire 3-port. We then roll out the Hellfire 2-port. Ladder ports. We'll get into port geometry in a bit as we go. We then roll out at some point. And it'll look quite similar. It looks quite similar to a Sidewinder, but we'll talk through it. We roll out the Hellfire Match, which is a 4-port design, which has some subtlety to it. We then rolled out very recently the Hellfire Titanium. So that's our brake line. Muzzle device to increase the recoil to make it 223 feel like a 308.
So it sounds like, Craig, that will be the one product you should make in China for the Chinese Liberation Army.
I like the thought there. So I think what you really mean to get into is port design on muzzle brakes. How do you create a characteristic? So when we created the Hellfire OG, the 3-port, each of these 3 ports is quite similar to one another. These are three ports that are. Excuse me, it's coming up on 11 here.
Are they vertically? Are they symmetric left to right, or is it? Or is some of the slope different?
So left to right, they're symmetrical, but there is a difference up and down.
Okay, got it. So to keep the muzzle down. Yeah.
Yes. When you want to put a muzzle brake on a rifle, the goal is for you to be able to basically control the rifle better when you pull the bend switch. Typically, a rifle, if you in a vacuum, a rifle is going to go straight back. Unfortunately, this is, what's the physics term of a spherical cow in a weightless vacuum or something? We don't exist that way. So when you pull the trigger on a rifle, you typically have something supporting it underneath because gravity is everywhere, and it does one of these. Yeah. So if you can take that hot, fast gas, throw it into the parachutes to get rid of some of it this way, but you can never be 100% efficient. So if you can direct some up and then push down, instead of getting a rock like this, you get less rock and we're pushing down on the front. So we're running straight back. If the rifle comes straight back and it doesn't do so violently, you typically have good control and good sight picture. So the original Hellfire was as aggressive as we could make the ports, mostly built around recoil with a little bit of muzzle device or a little bit of muzzle rise built in.
Okay, got it.
We then made the Hellfire 2-port, which has flatter ports.
Okay.
And the goal there was to have something that wasn't so stinking loud. The Hellfire muzzle brake is loud. You're creating an enormous amount of sound and sound pressure that is moving in all directions, but including back toward that shooter. So we flatten these ports out. This is not as efficient of a brake from a recoil reduction or a muzzle control standpoint. But if you don't want something that's going to rattle your brain around so much, this is a really good option for you. Died here.
I think I need to let you go soon.
It's all right. I get some coffee or something moving here. We then, with our Hellfire Match, and the reason I'm holding the titanium is the titanium is basically our Hellfire Match with the 4th port cut off. You can see on this one, if you look quite closely, these ports are different in how far they cut into the top. So every port in our Hellfire Match, and then obviously with our titanium as well, every port is different. So we really got into port optimization. The first one is flatter, keeps a lot of blast off the shooter, but it doesn't create as much upside because we know that a brake, whether you put it on a 6BR or a 300 PRC, they all need to be shootable. So if you start getting really aggressive with upward, especially in that first port where the pressures are higher, you start to what's really good on a dasher might be a pain in the ass on a big magnum. So
Mhm.
pretty top bottom symmetrical, but it's flatter because it keeps some of that blast off the shooter. The second one is a little more aggressive. Your pressure has slowed down. We want to capture more of it, be more efficient with it, but we also cut it a little bit higher because we want to push down a little more. And as we go forward, your ports become more aggressive and higher cut so that we're getting as much predictable muzzle control downward as we can. We're creating as much kind of catch with these ports
Okay.
for recoil reduction as possible. And we don't want to rattle your teeth in your skull any more than we have to.
Okay.
We observed something with muzzle devices, and that's why we made at some point the Maverick, our suppressor that you can kind of take in half and put a brake on the end of. Because if I took an anvil and we were in the room together and I said, all right, Ilya, I'm going to smack this thing with a hammer. You could know it's coming. You're not in any danger. I smack it with a hammer and you're going to flinch and blink some amount because that's the appropriate human response to some sort of shock and noise. Maybe not you, you're harder than the rest of us, but basically everyone else is going to flinch and blink if you do that. The same thing happens when you pull a trigger. That happens, you get an enormous amount of sound pressure that washes over you, and your brain, as a defense mechanism, basically shuts off for a second. You do this, even though you don't think you are. I promise you that you are.
For a split moment there, you lose your situational awareness completely. You're not staying on target.
And when you think about how long that split moment is, think about how far that projectile is moving during that split moment. And then you've got to reacquire something. So if you can reacquire it when it's 300 yards downrange versus 400 yards downrange or 500 yards downrange, you have a lot more time to get back on and reacquire. And if you want to watch trace, if you want to watch the bullet land, if you want to have some real acquisition of that projectile moving downrange, the faster you can pick it back up, the better. And also in a world, PRS type precision rifle shooting, when you're shooting a 30-pound dasher, it's not beating up your shoulder, but you do want to keep it very flat. You want to mitigate that recoil as much as possible and balance it with you as a human. So when I was getting into the complexity of muzzle brakes comes from the nuance of exactly what you want that product to do. There's your nuance. If you simply want to cut as much recoil as possible, there's port geometry that you can implement to do so. You want to control the muzzle downward, you can do it. You can make them flastier or quieter. It's all kind of a compromise game, and picking where you want to be on that. There's a Canadian fella, Yannick Seb, who recently did a muzzle brake test. It was fairly exhaustive. He had dozens of muzzle brakes, and he measured sound pressure, he measured recoil reduction, he measured muzzle rise, and the conclusion that he came to was there is no best on the market. There are lots of good products. It really comes down to what's your goal with it, and find the thing that lines up with that.
Very interesting.
From a pure physics standpoint, I'm very proud of, and this is one of the utility patents we have is this mounting system, how it mounts, how versatile it is, all of that stuff matters. But if you're talking about pure physics, it's basically a game of what do you want it to do, and if you figure out what you want it to do, well, then you can get to work on designing something that accomplishes that.
Very interesting. So I have to admit, I think we've talked about that a little bit. I'm not super recoil sensitive. Again, one of the advantages of being in the same class as a teenage rhinoceros, weight-wise, is that I can soak up a lot of recoil. I'm trying to keep the sound manageable, and I want to keep the muzzle rise manageable. So I don't shoot 30-pound 6BR. For an arrow hunter, I'm going to shoot a 15-pound 6.5 Creed with factory ammo. There is now not enough recoil there to bother me. I just did a class, 500 rounds in 3 days of 308 out of a 9-pound rifle. It's fine. All right, like I said, I'm a large meaty guy. I don't particularly care about recoil within reason, right? I've shot an 8-pound 338 Lapua once and only once, without a break.
That's enough.
That was good. But it's very interesting. But you're right. Muzzle rise is probably the name of the game for a competition shooting.
Yeah, if the rifle tracks directly backwards, your ability to stay on target through recoil and drive the rifle is so much greater. even if it's recoiling and tracking more, as long as it doesn't start flipping, everything's similar.
Very cool. Well, I'm gonna shoot my Narelle Hunter match with a suppressor, the first one, and then I want to do another one in April, and I want to see, maybe I'll do that one with a muzzle brake and see,
When is that? When's your first match, Ilya?
The weekend before shot. I'm gonna go to Arizona to have a match there. It's a pro am match since I'm new at this. We'll see what unlucky soul they pair me with, because I'll drive them nuts. And then from there I'm gonna drive straight to SHOT Show.
Cool.
And then I want to do a match probably in Colorado in the beginning of April. And then I'm going to shoot a team match, the Burris Optics Challenge in Wyoming in June.
Oh, cool.
So that's my kind of, that's the plan. And I've been shooting for a long time, and I shoot a lot, right? I shoot more in a month than a typical hunter does in his lifetime and his kid's lifetime.
What is that, a few dozen rounds?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Most hunters, a case of ammo is going to last them a lifetime.
Yeah, I'd be a lot richer if that's how much I shot. But anyhow, but competition is new for me, and it's going to be interesting. I enjoy this kind of things. I don't know what I'm going to like the most. I'm going to start with a suppressor, right? That's my initial guess, that I don't like muzzle blast, and then we'll see. We'll see where it takes me, and then maybe try to do the next one with a break and see where that takes me, and then decide from there.
Yeah.
But I know it's getting late, and I don't want to hold you here for too long. Since we talked about muzzle rise and muzzle recoil, one of the things that I'm learning as I'm practicing for the NRL Hunter match is I'm experimenting with different ways of using shooting bags. I use a Game Changer axe. For the most part, I have a pint-sized Game Changer that I use when I go hunting. I hunt quite a bit. It's one of the nice things about living in New Mexico. But for competition, I have a Game Changer axe. And when I glanced at your website, something I had no idea you do, you have several very clever products that made with what looks like a customized version of the Game Changer, right?
Mm-hmm.
That
yeah, rail changer.
Yeah,
I think I have one of those. This guy.
Okay.
So this is our Rail Changer X. An additional generation of this will come, but effectively you can take a Game Changer, attach it through. We've got a little hook up here that is on a slider.
Okay.
Like so, and then some little attachment points in the back here where you can basically attach a bag to your rifle this way. Okay. So if you're shooting positionally, the idea of you're a big strong guy, so it's less of a deal for you unless you have like weird baby hands or something. But you can meat hook your rifle with one hand and your bag with the other, and you can sometimes sort it out. But a lot of shooters, the idea of their entire system, bag and all, being all connected, where they can move the entire thing at once, it's one less thing to think about. That's a cool product. I don't have the bag that goes with it, but this is our grip changer arm, and we've got a little bag that slides onto this. It's almost a grippy product. It's kind of light and small. We sell a ton of those in the hunting community because whole package you're looking at just under a pound, and that's a nice to have as well.
Okay, that's actually interesting. So for narrow hunter, there are weight limits, so I cannot attach a Game Changer, a 10-pound bag to a rifle. I'm not going to make any weight limit. But the light and small is interesting. As far as getting the bag and the rifle set up, I'm shooting a relatively light rifle, so I don't have any real issues with it. But the hunting aspect is interesting, right? So when I go hunting, I have the pin-size Game Changer basically clipped to my belt. And if I need to get a shot off quickly, get it off the belt, put it on something, put a rifle on it, it does get a little laborious. The idea of being able to attach a bag to a rifle is interesting. It's something to consider. In the last few minutes, because I want to wrap up before you collapse on me, there was a question earlier, something about your M type reloading dies, resizing dies, something like that. You guys got the whole reloading thing going.
Do you reload much, Ilya?
I reload when I have to. I use a Redding turret press. So basically, when I can avoid it, I don't reload. I enjoy reloading, but it takes time. but I
I've got a
reload
ton of
8.6 Black
rounds on a
Hollow,
T7.
6.5 TRC, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, the Reading T7 is the press that I fell in love with reloading on. When we did our zero reloading press, I didn't bring one out. They're like 30 pounds. So they're kind of unwieldy. We took all the presses that we really loved, centered around, honestly, a T7, and thought, how do we take this and make it as perfect as we can possibly make it? So our zero reloading press is a flagship product. We've got nearly 6,000 of them in the market.
Okay,
Massively popular for us. The M series reloading die, this is, to my knowledge, the only micrometer adjustable headspace reloading die on the market. So basically what we've got here is an inside sleeve, and this is caliber specific, an external sleeve. You screw it down, and then you can, with this guy on top here, adjust to the thousandth or conceivably less exactly what you want your headspace to be. It is also modular in the sense, I don't know if I have a spare. Oh, I do have another sleeve. So this one is 223. If I wanted it to become whatever this one is, 308, put that guy down. And suddenly I've got a 308 die. This is all 17.4 on the outside. It's beautifully well machined. And you've got, again, micrometer adjustability in your headspace. Other features we have.
You can have perfectly consistent headspace precisely dialed to what you need.
Yep, dial it just like a seating die, right? Seating dies are great because you pick your number, you dial it, you go on with your life. The dies themselves, they are reamer cut, which is great. They're on size all the time. We worked with brass manufacturers. So when you're in this industry, there's always something that someone else makes that's making your life more difficult. If you're an optics manufacturer, poor optics mounts make your life really difficult.
If you're an optics manufacturer, I make your life difficult.
Yeah, that too. But we can't spec you to size. That'd be odd, you know. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. But you know, the reamer cut, we are working with brass manufacturers to make sure that we are sizing brass down, not all the way to new size, but to very near new size. Because the thing that makes a brass manufacturer's hard is dies that don't size their brass enough, and chambers and rifles that are too big. These are the bane of the existence of a brass manufacturer. I'm good friends with the guys at Alpha. I've got great contact with the American team at Lapua. I have a lot of respect for the Hornady team. You know, we're friends with all of them. And when we call them and say, "Hey, we want to make a sizing die," you know, we make 657 300 PRC. The arcs are coming. You know, if Alpha or Lapua or somebody's going to bring out a new cartridge, we can typically go to them and say, "Hey, give us your spec size for what this brass should be, and we are going to have reamers created that we can cut these dies with. It'll just be perfect all the time. And you can improve them because we just want to make really good dies. We don't care what size they are. You care what size they are far more than we do on that brass, and that's given us an opportunity to make a line of products that is, they're just right all the time. And especially with this guy, you've got features that nothing else has, you know, and we built in spring-loaded decapping. All of our mandrels have full-length ground expansion, and you can get the mandrels in different sizes to set your neck tension as well. Swappable, interchangeable little decap pins that have wrench flats on them so that you can actually get a hold of things to change them. You know, we took every feature that we'd ever found in a die that we liked, and then the micrometer adjustable headspace, which that's John just making things happen in his head that are unbelievable. And we've got dies with the M series here, and I don't have one on me, but the S series is also coming, which is similar die, only without the micrometer adjustability, but all the reamer cutting and the same mandrel and all those products as well.
That's very
It's a great
clever.
product line.
Yeah, that's very clever. Very interesting. I have to admit I haven't bought anything reloading related for quite a long time because I've been trying to. There's so many scopes on the market, so many new rifles. I've been trying to not reload as much. I reload things that are too expensive to buy, basically.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Link is asking what ammo I'm going to use at an NRL Hunter match. I'm going to use Hornady's 147 grain factory ammo. I tested a bunch of it. It's consistent enough in my gun. It's not. I can get better accuracy out of hand loads. In a competition, I don't think the ammo is going to be the limiting factor. I think I will be.
If you've got
So,
a pretty good rifle and pretty good ammo, the limiting factor is very quickly going to become your ability to use them, especially as a new competitor.
Yeah, the limiting factor is definitely going to be my ability to use it.
Sure.
So I chrono the ammo. It has good, reasonable dispersion. It has reasonable extreme spread. The ammo is not going to limit me, and there is a reasonably good chance that Hornet is going to send me good enough to get me through the first competition of 2. So I don't have to worry about that. But for example, for 6.5 TRC, I mean, I had some sponsored ammo here and there, but it's not a high volume rifle. I am going to set up to reload that because buying factory ammo for the volumes that I shoot with almost anything is prohibitively expensive. That I'm going to have to reload. Like 8.6 Blackout, I have to reload, right? Because it's just an unusual cartridge. There are several others that I reload, but for 223, for example, or 308, I can't get factory ammo that's good enough and that's priced well enough where I don't have to. All right, we've been at it for almost 2 hours. After 2 hours, my locals live stream is going to crap out. So that means we need to start wrapping up.
Right.
Craig, I really appreciate you coming here and sharing all this information. This is informative. I like it.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm on the spectrum, but I also don't like idle chit chat. So information is important. Is there anything else you want to wrap up with? Anything else coming or anything else in your product line that I didn't touch on that you think should go out there?
I mean, ARC is a thing. We're not going to dig into ARC on this. We got 3 minutes left. Our product line has become very broad because our core design mantra has been, what are things that we either can't buy what we want because it's not made the way that we'd like for it to be made, or that we can't buy at all because no one else is making, period. So, in 2016, when these things kind of started happening, John was shooting some competitively. I was shooting quite a bit more. Now my kids are at ages that I've got an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I'm going to play Fortnite with them, and I'm going to watch soccer games, and I'm going to spend my weekends with my kids because at some point they're going to get up, move out, and fall in love. And it's, I'll have time to shoot matches then. But John and I were shooting a lot, and we would ourselves have problems and make products against those problems. Or we would be on the firing line and watch someone else have a problem and see if we could make products to fit their problems. And what that led to was a pretty sprawling product catalog. But it all kind of belongs to the same mother of, if you are a serious precision rifle shooter, enthusiast, competitor, long-range hunter, whatever it is, we think that we make products that can improve your life. Improve that experience. And we don't make anything cheap, but everything we make, we very much are willing to stand behind. We make it here. We invest in making it here. We're enormously proud of the idea that we're doing what we're doing, the way we're doing it, where we're doing it. And we've always got a list of what products are coming next. And the good news is that list is forever long. And every time I come to something like this, you get another suggestion of, you should make this. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not, but that's okay, because just like you, I show you something and you go, I got an idea. And it's just it's kind of a continuous deal that's a lot of fun for us. So I'm grateful. We get to do awesome stuff here. I don't know, we've still got unbelievably 25 people that are still on. Thank you guys for sticking around.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, warm up 419. If you want 10% plus free shipping, that sale doesn't technically start till the morning, but go nuts. Wear yourself out. Lots of stuff in stock. We'll also have Black Friday sales and all those things, but stock and making sure that you can get the item you want long term becomes the problem during the holiday season. We make a lot of parts, but we're very, very fortunate that we sell even more. That's
a good place to be.
Yeah.
All right. I don't think I can do much better than that. Thank you all for sticking with us for these 2 hours. Craig has been a great guest. If there's anything we missed, if there is anything I didn't see in the chat box, any other questions pop up, please put them in the comments, whatever platform you are on. I'm gonna keep an eye on everything, and I'll forward them to Craig as necessary. And if there is enough stuff, I'll ask him to join me again.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna see Craig at Shot Show. We'll probably record a few things there, depending on what other new things you have, and we'll go from there. Thank you all,
Perfect.
and good night.
Yeah.